All right, well, I might get us started. So, good afternoon, everybody. Welcome. Thanks so much for joining us today as part of NENA's Post-Growth Futures Week. Before we begin, I'd like to begin by acknowledging the traditional custodians of the lands that we're all joining from today and pay my respects to elders past and present. I also extend that respect to any Indigenous people who are joining us here today, whatever country they come from. So today's conversation is going to ask what it means to move beyond extractive models of business and toward more regenerative ways of creating value. In doing so, it's important to acknowledge that the dominant economic system that most businesses operate within today were built through and remain dependent upon processes of colonization, extraction, and dispossession. Indigenous cultures across this continent and around the world have long practiced forms of economic life grounded in custodianship, reciprocity, responsibility, and relationship to country. So, as we attempt to imagine regenerative futures, may we be mindful of whose knowledge has been marginalized and be inspired by the legacy of First Nations people as we seek to genuinely imagine ways to regenerate relationships between people, communities, and the living world. So, one of the big questions that we're exploring throughout this series is how to begin transitioning away from economic systems built around endless growth and extraction, um, bound up in colonial and neo-colonial systems of exploitation. But that also raises a really important practical question in terms of what that means for businesses operating within the current dominant economic paradigm. So, this session is going to explore what regenerative business might look like in practice and how organizations could begin shifting from extractive and growth-driven models towards approaches, grounded in sufficiency, stakeholder well-being, restoration, and long-term resilience. This is an important conversation because for most of us, businesses are one of the primary places through which we interact with the economy and through which we're able to either resist or actively shape society. So, my name's Tarek, and I'm one of the board directors of the New Economy Network Australia, and I'm also a member of our Strategic Directions group. So, NENA is what we like to call ourselves because it's, yeah, quite cute. And we're a member-led cooperative supporting collaboration, learning, and action towards a just and regenerative new economy in Australia, and hopefully beyond as well. Today's session in particular is supported by the Regenerative Business Hub, a new NENA hub that our speaker today is the convener of, and the hub explores how businesses and organizations can move beyond extractive models towards economic approaches grounded in regeneration, sufficiency, and long-term well-being. We'll also share information at the end of the session about how to get involved with NENA and continue engaging with the hub community. So our speaker today is Rachel Bevans. Rachel works at the intersection of regenerative business, sustainability, and systems change, helping organizations rethink success beyond growth and shareholder value. Her work focuses on supporting medium to large businesses to transition towards more restorative and regenerative approaches grounded in sufficiency and long-term ecological and social value creation. Rachel's approach emphasizes shifting business narratives towards regeneration, resilience, and prosperity for people and planet. So I'll just hand over to you now, Rachel, and you can share some slides if you'd like. Yeah, take it away.
Great, thank you. Okay. Can you see that okay? It's all clear? Yep. Okay, great. So I'm Rachel Bevans. I'll introduce myself in a minute, but just an acknowledgement of country first is I do acknowledge that I'm meeting with you today from the lands of the Gadigal people of the Eora Nation, and also acknowledge the traditional custodians of the various lands on which you all work today and pay respect to elders past and present. And I extend that respect to other Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people joining us today. And so what I'd what we thought we'd run through with you today, it's myself and my business partner who is unable to make it today. So Pat is unfortunately not here. Was just run through with you really the narrative that we're kind of talking to at the moment with medium to large businesses. And it has been a bit of trial and error, and we think we're in a place now where we're getting quite a lot of interest. So a lot of this you'll probably be extremely familiar with. So I'm definitely not meaning to patronize anyone here, but so 'cause really the purpose was sort of to take you through where we've got to and why we're doing what we're doing. And then at the end I do have some slides just to run through that for with you, with everyone. And then absolutely Q&A at the end, and would love to have any feedback and input from other people as well. So what we're really trying to do is help business leaders rethink growth, pushing beyond net zero and addressing overconsumption, collaborating with our clients to challenge paradigms and find new ways to create value that embrace sufficiency, restore and regenerate people, planet, and prosperity. I'm just going to run through quickly who we are, the problem we're aiming to address, the key findings about business that we've used to sort of really give ourselves some key entry points for medium to large businesses, and then our narrative and approach, why now, and then go into the Q&A. That's myself and Pat, and we've both been working with medium to large businesses from a consulting perspective for the last 30 years, and both of us have increasingly, Pat's more gone into sort of capability development, really unlocking the potential of people, and I've moved further into really helping businesses understand what they stand for and their purpose, and become purpose-driven, human-centered, and more sustainable, and integrate the sustainability. And now really together what we're doing is developing the Regenerative Business Collective, which will be or has been set up as a global network of independent specialists. So we have a couple in the UK that are ready to go as well, really established to help the clients find new ways to create value. So ultimately, the problem that we're trying to address is infinite growth, extraction, and overconsumption are having a negative impact on social and ecological well-being. At the eye of the storm, we believe are medium and large businesses, and as the sort of primary drivers of ecological overshoot and systemic inequality. But they also have the scale, innovation, capability, and money to make a difference if you can make that change. And I know even when you look at a lot of the new economic models, they have only more recently started developing translations for businesses. So we've been sort of thinking about this before anyone had started doing all of their business, like donut economics and wellbeing economy have now developed their sort of business modules. We'd also noticed that there was kind of a gap in the market. It was almost like, don't touch the medium and large businesses. Let's try to resolve everything else around. So really what we're looking at was what are the issues there? And I mean, in Australia, they employ 40% of the people, and they account for 54% of the value of products and services. And I know that's using a traditional measure. So, but that is the best measure we've got. And so there is a significant amount of value and people there, like human people and products and services that people need, even if that value is inflated for the way that we do things at the moment. And then they have the biggest infrastructural issues. In the private sector, sort of medium-sized businesses, they do have tend to have a more of a local regional infrastructure and scale and stability, but they are operating with enhanced financial pressures. They do get squeezed, so they're neither a small business nor a large business. And we do feel that they are actually quite a big opportunity, the medium businesses in particular, and that is where there are a lot of conversations around some of those being able to transition easier into co-ops and so forth. But certainly where a lot of the opportunities are, where they want to really have some sort of have an advantage over the larger businesses, because they don't have a lot of advantages economically, being squeezed on either side. and they're often called the forgotten middle. So we do think that there is a really good lot of opportunity there. And then obviously the large businesses being the primary drivers of ecological overshoot and systemic inequality. The business problem then is really when you look at why aren't they doing anything more, it is we know that they face rising pressures to drive profitable growth. So most of them are hooked into the capitalism and the way that we have traditionally had to drive growth. But they are also getting these rising expectations for better outcomes for people, communities, and nature from the people who buy their products, from their employees, from investors. So all of their stakeholders are increasing expectations for better outcomes. It has been typically more of a zero-sum game. So whilst many businesses are making progress on sustainability, it has been, it has been investor driven or shareholder driven. Much of that focus has been on measuring risk and getting to a neutral state and very little in that addressing the overconsumption or underconsumption for that matter. Um, so I mean, that's where we see the two sides coming together is one is there's the neutral. And so we really want to try and get them to push past neutral. And then the second is the starting to address the overconsumption. And that's really where our two parts come together. So we want to help business leaders rethink growth, push beyond neutral to net positive, restorative, and regenerative, and embrace sufficiency as the sort of, for want of another term, but it's as a Goldilocks of consumption, and they get this idea that it's like not too little, not too much. That there is some sort of a right amount of consumption where you're meeting people's needs and not exceeding them or under meeting them. And so why we're existing is to really shift people from those extractive models to and divisive models to create new value that enhances long-term social and ecological well-being and prosperity for all. Our key findings about business, and there's just there's been loads of them because we've been working on the sort of like where do we go for the last 4 years, sort of really coming out of COVID. And so there's been loads of them. We've done our own research. We've also, pull in research from books and all of the other and media articles and all of this. So and other third-party research. And so these are just a few of the key findings that have really just helped us hone what our offer is. And we know that large businesses and CEOs who run them are absolutely subject to a structural imperative for growth, and that is not going away. And if anything, that is heightened at the moment where we're going into a low growth economy. So there's growth panic, and every single channel I look at, it's all about growth, more so than everybody is essentially competing for a pie that is almost is lessening. Leaders need to have a commercial lens. So this came from one of our clients when we were doing some research, and that even purpose needed to add up to a number. So they were really trying to commercialize and work out if they were being purpose driven, how they sort of link that to ultimately to shareholder value. So they were saying everything has to have a very clear commercial lens. It can't be just anecdotal. It's got to have the proof, the financial proof. As I said, large businesses are already dialing up strategies to deliver growth in a low growth economy. And in that environment, the ideas of degrowth and post-growth are really scary enough when talking about the economy, let alone expectations of business. So we've been very careful to tailor our message so that it doesn't scare people away, because otherwise we're not going to attract them in the first place. Paul Polman and Andrew Winston wrote Net Positive, and off the back of their experience in Unilever, and there was some great insights from that book, really saying that good companies do need to be around for a long time, and they can't do that by shrinking. It's the kind of growth that matters. So if your company can produce a regenerative product, then go for it. Large businesses who are driving global efficiency and increased profits become removed from the human need. So the more that they start to drive global efficiency and profits, the more removed they become. Small businesses, and I thought this was a great way that Hickel talked about a restaurateur, and I actually saw a presentation from Ted Trainer shortly after, because I was battling with the idea of capitalism and being a small business, and I was like, am I a capitalist? But both of them also say that small businesses are not really capitalists. They are actually they're really focused on, like, this restaurateur family, who is actually just, making sure there's food on the table for everyone, that their employees are paid fairly, that they're just satisfying a need for the community, for their local community. And they might go on one holiday a day. So that's not massive profit. It's just this small, steady profit that makes sure that everybody sort of stays with a roof over their head and dinner on the table, and is treated well. So they're really focusing on satisfying a concrete need, and tend to be quite localized as well. And profits, one of the things that Paul Pullman and Winston said is that profits should come from solving the world's problems, not creating them. And I thought that was, again, that's another really good way of just flipping flipping the coin on that, flipping the side on that, to say we should never be, whatever we're doing, we need to make sure that we're not creating more problems. And one of the 6 modules we've developed is specifically designed around this, because in our business we talk a lot about single-minded problems, and answering a single-minded problem. And what ended up happening is, by being single-minded about it and answering that single-minded problem, you actually can cause a lot of other problems as a result. So what we do is we make sure that if we look at people's propositions and we say, okay, well, this is actually very single-minded, it's solving this problem, but it's actually creating a lot of others. And those might be, it's solving convenience, but it's causing obesity, with where you come with like the solution around fast food. So what would you do instead, that would not result in all of those problems? If everyone had their basic needs met, it would vastly increase material demand to bring the millions out of poverty. Something has to give. That something might need to be the consumption of the richest billion among us. So even these people who are saying that growth is okay, and everyone needs to have their basic needs met, that even just that is going to is going to tip us over the edge. So we do need to focus our efforts on those, on the consumers who are. So when it comes to sufficiency, it's the people who are consuming more than what they need, and not more than that baseline, rather than it is targeting any or speaking to anyone who's underneath that. And they can then be the outcomes of some of the other work that you do with these businesses. And then really turning that $600 billion that's spent annually on advertising to make us desire more things, to be turned into creating demand for net positive products, or toward finding less meaning in stuff and more in people, and living in service to others. It's easier for small businesses and new brands to bake it into the proposition from the start. And so what we have found is, like, a lot of these large businesses, medium to large businesses, and their brands are being chipped away from the edges from great small businesses and new brands who are really baked it into the proposition. So I don't know if anyone's familiar with the Leica brand for pet food, but if you go and have a look at their website, the what they're doing sitting behind the brand, that you actually don't hear a lot about, is a lot of real sort of sustainable and moving into restorative and regenerative, making sure that it's beyond carbon neutral, and they've really baked in sustainability from the beginning. And there's loads of examples like that. Tony's Chocolonely, some of these big brands that have really made an impact on the business. They've sort of baked it into the proposition from the start. So large businesses, it's a lot harder to do, to sort of shift. So we really need to help them find new ways to create value for customers and really address some needs, address like real needs that are in the market. And these people do say, and I know competitive is not a word that you would technically use in regenerative, but that this is what they're saying, is that they need to have a competitive advantage or opportunity to be first to market that's relevant and compelling to consumers and different to competitors. And that's sort of kind of part of their criteria. Beyond the usual suspects like Patagonia and Interface and so forth, multinational corporations, there are many who are embarking on regeneration. It tends to be a lot in regenerative agriculture, and they're doing it in their supply chains, less on the front line. There's very little evidence that overconsumption is being addressed on the demand side, except through circular initiatives. So, but I don't think that is a circular initiative like recycle and repair that's not intentionally there to reduce overconsumption. It's there as a waste or whatever. I don't think they're looking at it so much as through a sufficiency or overconsumption lens. If you look at the businesses that are doing a lot of that area, it's great, it's fantastic, but I don't think overconsumption as a whole is being addressed. Strategic marketing, which is blamed for overconsumption because most people think of them and the ads that chase you around the internet trying to make you buy stuff and what have you, is technically blamed for overconsumption. But they are the ones who operate at that point of inflection of supply and demand. So if you are a product manager, you're in the perfect place to be able to really make a change sitting right at those where extraction and overconsumption meet growth objectives. They are actually in the primary position and of influence to be able. They know how to dial up growth. So they are in a primary position to be able to do something about it. And there is also then that need to translate any theoretical, abstract and feel-good concepts into tangible outcomes that matter to customers and support leaders to make an impact in their role. So they're kind of like they're all our sort of findings that sort of went into our what we're doing for our in our business. In presentation mode, I did have this building, but it's not working at the moment for the presentation. So I've just got it all up on slide. So it is a bit heavy, and I do apologise for that. But so our key entry points are tackling structural change is a big ask for medium to large legacy businesses. So our approach is designed to work with them to identify and prioritise opportunities where they can make meaningful change. We help them rethink growth and challenge paradigms, changing the narrative from driving infinite growth to creating meaningful value. We push them beyond extraction and neutral or net zero, which is probably what they normally think about, is towards regeneration to influence what and how businesses create value for their stakeholders, with the imperative that whatever the solution, it always puts back more in than it takes out and doesn't create more problems. So we're setting very strict criteria for the ideas that come out of our work with our clients. That they adopt sufficiency as that Goldilocks of consumption and use this lens to influence what and how people consume on the demand side. And then they apply that dual lens of regeneration and sufficiency to familiar strategic framework. So we bring to them some uncomfortable stuff, and unfamiliar stuff around regeneration and sufficiency, to some familiar strategic frameworks, and put that over that lens over them. So they're not dealing with just a load of unfamiliarity. It actually helps them then to be able to apply it to what they've been spending the last 20, 30 years understanding. So it's not just throwing everything out. Identifying and prioritizing those opportunities. We're understanding and tapping into the human need for regeneration and sufficiency. And we're helping them dig deeper into the insights driving the solutions to ensure that they're meeting real human needs and not manufacturing wants, and driving greater value, particularly at a local level. So our narrative and approach is really, very simply, for decades, business has focused on manufacturing wants, producing and selling more. But the next chapter of business is different. It's about creating value that meets the real needs of people, communities, and nature, neither in shortfall nor in excess. And that's where we see regeneration and sufficiency coming together, is that dual lens. So regeneration influences what and how businesses create value, enhancing people, communities, and ecosystems, making them healthier, more resilient, and vibrant than before. And sufficiency influences what and how people consume, inspiring individuals and communities to thrive on enough. And we have 7 key paradigm shifts that then inform our principles and the criteria for solutions. So when we're doing our collaborative sessions, the value creation labs, we'll use these as criteria. So you always have to put more back in than you take out. Going from winning at all costs versus the competition, to driving positive change through innovation, collaboration, and co-creation. From a focus on shareholders and short-term profit and infinite growth, to ecological and social well-being as the goal, and long-term value for all as the result. From operating a self-serving entity, generating isolated solutions that cause problems elsewhere, to bring holistic systems thinking, creating interconnected solutions. Striving for global efficiency while seeking local license to operate, to really creating local community prosperity, driving greater value and replicating that. From actively encouraging overconsumption while many go without, to sufficiency is that Goldilocks of consumption. And from driving volume by performance marketing, to meaningful value over meaningful volume, meaningless volume. And so our approach involves, we've developed some discrete value creation labs that can look at, it's designed for business leaders and for strategic marketers. So most of them will understand the frameworks that we have. Some of those, the frameworks around the Ansoff matrix and the funnel and so forth, they'll be, and the single-minded proposition, they'll be very familiar with. And so what we've done then is redesign those so that we're really looking at what that regenerative opportunity is, to find new pathways to create value. Challenging paradigms, so getting people to understand what all of their paradigms are, and then how we flip them, and then identifying what are some of those, the key ones that might work for their business. Looking at that funnel, which is essentially the way that people feed consumers through from not knowing about your business and brand to buying more and more and more from you, is reviewing that whole funnel through a sufficiency lens and finding new ways to innovate rather than continuing to get people to buy more of what they don't need. The system-minded proposition I touched on before, connecting and replicating, which is really about finding what that platform might be for generating more local community value. So rather than global efficiency, is looking at a very localized level, and new business models, and how we can actually connect people to connect the local community, and replicate rather than scale, so that it's appropriate to other local communities, to that specific local community. And then the regenerative experience is really where we're getting people, I guess, immersed in the research that we've done and various principles around sufficiency and regeneration through creative exercises so that they're actually experiencing it. Um, and so these reasons everyone here on the call will probably know already, but the why now is that we have there is definitely a human need. So we did some research, and when we were talking to people around sufficiency, they kind of had this real sense of relief and a newfound freedom in having and being enough. It was like, oh, it'd be so nice if I could just take the pedal off the foot off the pedal of consumption and give them permission to not have to buy and not keep up with the Joneses. Um, so we have a very good we had a very strong sense that that is kind of wanted from consumers. And then when you look at a lot of what's out there on social media and TikTok, you get a lot of de-influencing. So, actually influencing around not spending and using what people have and embracing new ways of living and minimalism and low tox living and those sorts of things. So there's quite a lot out there around there. Um, and with the sufficiency, the other thing that came through is when they thought that they were having enough, that felt like to them, because we talked to them about the two concepts and we put definitions behind them around sufficiency and regeneration, and they were like, "Oh yeah, that regeneration sounds great." And if I'm free from having to spend and be totally bombarded by these messages all the time, then I've actually got time and space for renewal and giving back to people and planet. So it was quite interesting the way that they were sort of trying to put these two and two together. And we got that from quite a few of them, which was quite interesting. Um, and so I think that's something that we can definitely benefit from. We can definitely work with the businesses, and because they need to see that there's a consumer need for this so that they can then the consumers will buy into it. So they and how I think they need to see the importance of this to be able to make these shifts. Um, there are real world models. So we've got a lot of them are large multinational corporates are pursuing regenerative agriculture with local farmers and treating them well. Um, there are quite a lot in fashion. So there's the food, fashion, and whilst it's definitely long way to go. Fact, there are a lot of fashion designers who are now sourcing regenerative materials. Um, so we've got that's starting to happen, and there are quite a lot of startups in things like regenerative fungi and algae and bamboo products. So for the construction industry, there's and for the food industry, packaging and so forth. Some of those areas which we know are big issues have got some great things happening. And of course, then we've got all the new economies coming as well. So there's loads of, whether it's ecological donut economics, regenerative economics, with John Fullerton, the well-being economy, and sufficiency economies. They're all sort of popping their heads up everywhere, and various versions of all of them as well. So there's loads of people pursuing a new economic model to go beyond GDP linear and extractive growth. Um, and a lot of that as well, I must say, is fairly new news to medium to large businesses. So whilst we're fairly embedded in it, it's kind of new to them, and to see all these different ways. Sometimes I think probably the most confused. It's great for them to see that there's all these different ways. It's kind of like, so which way do we go? Is the big question I get. So it's like there's now, they now understand there's all these different new economies that they could possibly sort of like think about and take ideas from. But, what is it? So there's no single answer, which does it makes it quite difficult for medium to large businesses who are sort of trying to go and shift direction or make a direction. It's difficult when there's lots of different ideas out there that they don't know which one to take. Um, we do see regeneration as the next evolution to business. Um, It's really about doing no harm is more business today and regeneration invents tomorrow. So businesses that rely on mitigating risk or going neutral will be left behind, and those embracing regeneration are building what comes next. Um, we're saying, of course, enough is enough. So regeneration is great, but without sufficiency, it risks perpetuating harm. People increasingly want products, services, and experience that do help them live better, and whatever that better may mean, and not buy more. And business leaders who understand this shift and design for enough will be the ones who shape the next decade of commercial innovation. And the world needs to act now. So we've obviously overshot seven of the nine planetary boundaries, and millions of people still fall short on all of the social dimensions. So, with its scale, innovation, capability, and money, and its ability to influence both what is created and what people consume, business is in a unique position to close the gap between ecological overshoot and social shortfall by focusing on sufficiency and regeneration. We just have to give them enough inspiration and incentive to do so, and so that we can create new value that really enhances social and ecological well-being and prosperity for all. So that is I guess that's where we're at the moment. I'm quite happy now to open up for questions and answers or any feedback or anything from anyone. That'd be fantastic.
Wow, yeah, that was great, Rachel. Yeah, really great overview of your work and just amazing to hear about. Because yeah, nobody's done what you're doing before. It's quite intriguing that that you've managed to be one of the first people to do that because it's not my area, but I've always seen the strategic need to do what you're doing. But I'm not a business-minded person. It's not personally my interest, but from a strategic point of view, I've always identified the gap. So it's fascinating and very timely that I think you've got the your collective going. I'm very, very excited to see what comes of it in the future. So,
Mm.
mm. um, yeah, if anybody has any questions, just feel free to like raise your hand or unmute yourself and just chime in. Yeah, knock yourselves out. Amy, yeah.
Hello, thanks, Rachel. I'm going to stay off camera because I'm actually at the gym, and you just don't
Good
need
on
to see
you.
that. Um, Thanks so much. It was really interesting. I'm much more familiar with social enterprise, and I guess I signed up to the webinar thinking it might be about this. So this was really interesting to learn what's happening at the much larger scale of business. I just something in my head. This is not a fully formed question, but let's see what comes out. So, in your experience, kind of or your opinion as well? Oh no, words come. I'm just thinking about so there's the businesses that we could probably agree that we still need the products and the services that they deliver and that society and humans need and that sustain the planet versus say things that we don't need. So
Mm,
the transition between what the company values, perhaps in terms of growth or not, and also just going,
mm,
actually, we don't need that thing. I was thinking one of my colleagues, I work at ANU, I'm in academia, and one of my colleagues is doing her PhD on greenwashing, and her case study is looking at Nestle and Kit Kats. And I'm just thinking they can go, yes, we're doing better packaging, we're doing better sourcing of our products, but ultimately we just don't need the ultra processed food products that Nestle predominantly produces. So
mm.
yeah, do you know what I mean? That's not a fully formed question, but I'm just interested in, I guess, that distinction between what's the point of transitioning larger companies if we actually just don't need them and the products.
Because you're still going to have 50% of the products and 40% of people employed by them in 20 years. So that's just that's not going to go away. That's the problem. And if we don't transition them and get them to do better, then that's a big chunk of people and a big chunk of products and services. They're not going to disappear overnight. It's it just they're it's well, certainly structurally, they're embedded. And if you think, 10, 20, 30 years, we've got to make a difference in that period of time, and they're not going to dissolve in that period of time.
Yeah, I
And
guess
there
fair.
are, yeah,
And
I
then
think
like,
that's,
working in parallel to that to get them to go away
yeah, and
through other means, not through your work. Yeah.
yeah, no, absolutely. And to transition to products that are healthier and so a lot of them actually, and this is it has been driven by consumer expectations, but and there's some of the big companies, and I know that this is like, greenwashing is a big problem, but although then you've got the other problem, which is greenhushing, and so they haven't been talking about what they have been doing because they're too scared to, and some of those companies are doing some really good stuff, so it's like, where do you go? But a lot of them have transitioned from, say, Coca-Cola company have now, just through consumer expectations, their water, and I'm not saying that's the best thing either, but water and juices and things like that, so healthier for you, have definitely increased as a portion of their portfolio rather than just the soft drinks. So over time, these things do happen, but we've got to help them really change the dial so it happens quicker. So just better for you or just do less harm is not good enough. It's not going to get us where we need to go quickly enough, and we need to push them further quicker. And that's what we've designed out those 6 workshops, as I said, those value creation workshops, is to say, well, what can you do that you could definitely define as putting more back in than taking out. So they're not going to be regenerative immediately. And we sort of like look at them and say to them, where are you on the scale from A to Z? And from extractive to restorative and regenerative. So where are you at the moment? Where would you like to be? And then what do we need to do to get you over that sort of net zero and into doing more good than you actually are doing harm? Does that answer your questions, Natasha? Or was that no? So that was Amy, wasn't it?
Yeah, that was great.
Natasha, would you like to ask your question?
Yeah, sure. Thank you. That was a really interesting presentation. And thanks to NENA for organizing. I'm actually dialing in from New Zealand, from Aotearoa, and I had a question about partnerships with Indigenous businesses. So Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander led businesses that you may have had, Rachel, in Australia, or with Māori Pacific businesses here in New Zealand, because some of the concepts that you outlined around regenerative practices and approaches, I think are already either being used by Indigenous-led businesses or actually very closely aligned to Indigenous approaches to sustainable and regenerative businesses. And I think that might be a really interesting area to explore in the region that we're in, because I often find I'm not a business person. I trained as a lawyer, I work in policy, and a lot of conversations I see in policy around regenerative economics are quite Western framed, which I find interesting in this part of the world because we're in the Pacific. We're not actually in Europe or North America. We're Australia and New Zealand are Pacific countries. But I think, I just wonder if actually some of the really good leading practices are actually happening within Indigenous communities, and if there's ways you found to harness those, or other opportunities to partner with Indigenous communities in this region to bring that lens into your work.
I think it's definitely an opportunity. It's something that we have been pursuing, and we haven't actually got there at this point in time. So we've sort of gone and worked through what we think our core proposition needs to be. But we do, yeah, no, absolutely. We're looking to partner with and pull into the collective Indigenous businesses. But it's a really interesting insight that you have there, that they're doing a lot of this stuff, and this where we've the findings that we have are not are definitely, there has been a lot of those resources that we've sort of tapped into for our research, but we haven't actually got any partnerships or anything at this point in time. But yes, I agree wholeheartedly with what you're talking about.
Great question, Natasha. Is there, any other questions from anybody? Okay, yeah, Carla, go ahead.
Thanks, Tarek. Thanks, Rachel, for your presentation. Really interesting to hear what you're doing with businesses. It can only be it can only be a good thing to have them thinking about this. I'm interested to know whether you've got any organisational examples where, in that medium size, you've been able to either engage with the idea of changing ownership structures, or you have any examples where ownership has actually changed. Because I think much of what you're talking about, especially in that larger size, if you're if you're a shareholder owned company, this thinking is just so difficult because you've got those fiduciary responsibilities for profit to shareholders. So I'm interested to know if you've got any examples where organizational structure has changed.
Not at this point, no.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, it's really interesting because that's where we do think the opportunity is with medium-sized businesses, particularly those ones that are sort of family-owned or the ones that are, private ownership and so forth. That there is a lot more opportunity there.
Yeah.
And that's something that we were definitely talking about, but it's not. It's not something. We've definitely got that sort of like thought in our toolkit, but it's like we haven't actually come across anyone who's looking in that direction at the moment.
Yeah, no, it's great. It's great work, I think, that you're doing. So thanks for doing it.
It's hard, I tell you.
Yeah.
I actually watched a Catherine Trebek's video called the Purpose video that she had about her journey. I was like, it is so like that. It's just exhausting some days. You sort of try to talk to people about it and they're like, this is so far from where we are now. And we've got quite a lot of interest in doing quite a few lunch and learns and talking to sort of that next tier. So not the super large businesses, but we've found now that, which is where we sort of started. But we're sort of now finding that next tier. So not necessarily the top four, but the next few who are looking for want of another word, that competitive advantage, and to try and do things a bit differently and to stand apart. So yeah, no, it's definitely not an easy sell.
Yeah, but it's
I thought everyone
interesting.
would be excited about it, but
It's interesting as a brand marketer, like in the experience that you've had in your career, that you've now landed on this place where people want a sense of differentiation. So how do you tap into the value creation story that differentiates them? So that's really cool. Yeah.
Yeah.
All right, I'll stop talking now.
No, that's great. Thank you.
Thanks, Carla. Malcolm, go ahead, mate.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yep. I'm an octogenarian grandparent who spent his life working as a professional, contracting to large corporations. And my experience has been that many people within those corporations feel concerned, but they're tied into that sort of hierarchical ladder. And really, most corporations I've worked for work in accordance with the doctrine of Milton Friedman, where he argued that social responsibility adversely affects a firm's financial performance, and that regulation and interference from big government will always damage the macroeconomy. Now, that is a sort of broad brush statement, and I recited that straight off Wikipedia, by the way, if you can refer to it. Now, my question comes around is the conversation so far hasn't mentioned regulation, because my experience is that's probably the only thing that shareholders, to which the boards of directors will report, will influence them, because your position in the pecking order in a corporation depends on how you perform within the ethos of that corporation. and not one of the large multinational corporations that I've worked or consulted for have a humane ethos. And still, and even more so. In fact, there's an ongoing reaction against ESG, which we're seeing that all of the good social responsibility targets are being pulled back, helped largely by the orange monster across the Pacific. But my question is really, how can we cut through and get action where it's needed, which is with government regulation, because that's the only thing boards of directors take notice of. I spend my time, I've been arrested for doing stuff which is fighting in the fossil fuel industry rather than being praised for it, you know. So, and I defend myself by saying, well, I got to the stage where I was being promoted in a corporation and found that I had to starting to have to make decisions I couldn't live with. So I just started my own company and became an independent contractor so I could choose who I worked for. When I look back on it, I still ended up working for those same people. So, you know, even with the we, us, we talk about we and us, but we and us have no influence, or relatively speaking, compared with them, the politicians and the lawmakers, who in turn tactically are looking for what they're going to do after they get chucked out of politics, often on the board of directors. How do we remove all of that and move towards the corporations with social conscience?
Yeah, it's such a good question. On the positive side, I would say things like, and whilst they're not answers, but when the 2019, 2020, the Davos Manifesto, and then the US Business Roundtable and the ASX, their fourth edition of their corporate governance guidelines, and the UK actually followed shortly after suit, and they all redefined the purpose of a business as creating long-term value for all stakeholders, and shifted that from it being short-term profits for shareholders. Right. So that purpose of a business has definitely shifted. And so a lot of those bigger organizations do have a purpose beyond profit. Now, that is translated into their ESG principles and or their sustainability and their sustainability plan. It is not I think that was a good start. Now we've got climate the newest one, like the latest one, is that climate has to be noted in financial reporting. So you actually have to divulge what you're doing in terms of the climate and your results and your impact. So that their regulatory requirements now in terms of reporting, and that integrated reporting is kind of like the next stage where it's real financial integrated with all of the six capitals, so with your people and all of that. So I do believe that there is a slow move that way, and they are doing it. And I don't think anything is helping across the ocean. And I think there's a lot of people that don't. But it's interesting because I do follow a few CEOs on LinkedIn, and I saw one the other day, and he'd be one of those, I guess a kind CEO, and like the one that you'd really want to be a leader. And he was saying he just read a book. There's a new book out from Sarah Wilson, which is about beneath the stars or something, and she apparently talks about all of this this consciousness as well. And he said, actually, it's about time that leaders started to think about this more, that it's not just growth for the sake of it. It's actually, that we've actually got to think about it broader. So it's not there yet, but I do actually think, and even if you look at some of the stuff that is coming out of the AICD, like the Institute of Company Directors, you see more of this, the consciousness and the responsible leadership and all of that sort of stuff. It is nowhere near where we need it to be for being, new economy, regenerative, and what have you, but and inclusive. But I do get a sense of a general shift there, that the leaders are becoming more conscious. Oh, there he's saying, there's Natasha. Okay, you've you're actually listening to it as an audiobook. Yeah. It was interesting that he was like, yeah, that was a great book. So yes, I think that's And of course, there's a big portion of them that are not like that, Malcolm. They're never going to be. And you've got the new book that came out from the McKinsey guys, which is about um, a century of plenty and growing 8%, like with 8% growth year on year or something. And you just sort of go, oh my God, and population growth. And it's absolute the antithesis of where the rest of these new economies is going. So you've got that on one side, and then you've got the new economies on the other, and it's like, yeah, we just hope maybe there's 51% that side and 49 the other.
Yeah, nibble them to death.
Yeah, exactly.
And the thing is, if you put a value on social capital, that's what they understand, because you can convert that into dollars.
Yes.
How many people don't you kill because you're doing that? And
Yeah.
and killing a person is worth $1 million, say, and those simple equations, the sort of things that even the general public can begin to understand. And also,
Yeah.
obviously, us as individuals, we need to, for example, divest appropriately. But it's a tough job. But I'm not looking forward to my granddaughter's future. To be honest with you, it's very, very tough.
Yeah.
Well,
Yeah.
thanks so much for your question, Malcolm. I echo your concerns about the future there. That's for sure. Especially being a relatively young fellow myself. Um, we have had a question from Philip in the chat. I'm sorry I missed that. Yeah, just hadn't been keeping an eye on it too closely. So he's asked, have you found that businesses are pursuing change due to cost/savings in their business, or due to the owners genuinely changing their thinking and wanting to make a change?
I'm finding that businesses are pursuing change for growth. um, and cost efficiency tends to be is where they're looking at AI at the moment. So that is kind of coming through most businesses. Yeah, exactly. That they're looking for AI to resolve cost efficiency, and I think, to be honest with you, we looked to launch this a while back, and when we started, it was really just when AI was sort of boosting up, and no one wanted to talk to us at all, because everyone in the businesses was trying to figure out how AI was going to be implemented in their business for efficiency. Now they're looking at it, starting to look at it for realizing that it's that you actually still need humans in the loop, and that how do we do this to actually create value and help our humans, rather than it just being cutting heads. So that has been, I guess, that's been an infiltration of that. Some are, I think, so that's from a business perspective. There's that's impacted. There's the fact that we are working in a low growth economy, and they're trying to they're competing for a smaller piece of what feels like a shrinking pie. So there is a lot of competitiveness in there, and that's where you can see quite an increase of talk around M&As, because people know that they can't get really sort of organic growth. There's less opportunity for organic growth, and there's more opportunity for them actually then growing by taking over another company or merging joint ventures and so forth. And then their business is seen as being growing, but it's really just putting two businesses together. And then the third part of that is really consumer or people expectations. So if we can show that people are wanting to live more sustainably and more regeneratively, that's true around the general population, and that people want to see some significant social change, and where we can, I think we're seeing quite a lot of that in the housing area at the moment. So I would say that's a big area where we're seeing quite a lot of it, from homelessness through to lack of housing because of cost of living and rentals and the house prices and all of that. So that's an area that is definitely, you can feel that from a consumer perspective. So when there are consumers who are buying or not buying and feeling certain ways, that is when businesses do start to pay attention. So honestly, I think that's where a lot of our opportunity is to really the groundswell, get people talking about it, get them, what is it that they need, what is it they want. And so many people don't want to be on the corporate ladder. Like coming out of COVID, I mean, from an employee perspective, you can really sense it as well, because coming out of COVID, there was a whole lot of in COVID, there was a whole lot of great stuff around well-being, and employees were treated really well. They were able to work from home. It made their lives a lot easier. It cost them less, and they were able to do more outside. And it was actually a lot more like Ted Trainor's Pittsburgh, his ideal situation. We were kind of closer there. The government helped us from a monetary perspective. And people were in a really great situation. We came out of that, and people were hoping that that would continue, and it did for a while. And then all of a sudden, when Trump came in, it was like everybody back to the office. Inclusion and diversity programs were cut. Costs were cut, and all of that sort of stuff. So the yeah, so employees now, and they want their business to be more sustainable. They want their business to be doing good for the community. They want to have to be treated well as employees. So I think things like and employees are looking for their businesses. If you look at, there's an Edelman Trust Barometer, which basically says that people are looking at the place that they work for. Certainly those people who work for other businesses and not those who work for themselves, but they're looking for those businesses to do good and to have an opinion about social issues and environmental issues and to be doing something about them. So there's a lot of expectations coming through there as well. So I think that's really where we can, through from employees through, investors have cooled off a bit. They were very after the BlackRock letters, Larry Fink's letters, and that area in particular. There was a lot of, you need to be purpose driven, you need to be values driven, you need to be doing your environment and social and governments and all that sort of stuff. And that has cooled off a bit. I think that sort of sense because of the current political environment, but. Yeah, I think that's so. It's really up to the people who, the employees, the people, their customers, actually buying their products, and the communities. So, license to operate, actually be a part of that community and not be causing environmental harm. I mean, that's where you do see quite a lot of it, as well as in the local communities, and it's then balancing jobs versus environmental issues when you come to things like mining and gas and so forth. But it's the people on the ground that they do listen to an extent as well. Sorry, that was a bit of a long-winded answer, but it was a big question. I probably missed half of the answer.
Oh, that's all right. We have time, I think. And I don't know if there's even any more questions yet. So yeah, any other questions from anybody? Knock yourselves out, because we still have, I think the session ends at 1:30, so we have quite a bit of time. If there's any lingering lines of thought that people would like to explore further. Because the only question I had, I think Malcolm already touched on it, which was I was interested in terms of the supply side of, you mentioned, marketing and stuff, people who are in those positions being well situated to do something about it. But I was thinking surely in terms of the demand side, there is a huge role for government intervention and regulation, because in the same way, like you have anti-smoking advertising laws and you have anti-gambling. I mean, they can still have the gambling ads, but you have the little message at the end at least. Could the Australian government not conceivably move in that direction as regards, say, overconsumption and just cracking down? It would probably be highly unpopular, but for instance, just cracking down on advertisements for certain products that just aren't needed, and just advertising in general, just limiting it, severely legislating to limit its presence. Certain kinds of advertising anyway, because obviously it could be used towards pro-social ends as well. Um, yeah, what do you
Yeah.
think about that? I think we mostly explored a lot of that, the role for the government in terms of intervening in this, but I was interested specifically around that overconsumption question because it seems that a lot can be done from a regulatory standpoint if we look at other demand side issues with specific products such as, yeah, tobacco, for instance.
Yeah, so it has come through from there's tobacco, alcohol advertising. So there is responsible advertising of alcohol as well. So that has come and changed. That's changed over the years as well to sort of restrict that. So it is in those what the products that they've said are not, so tobacco, advertising, gambling. Sorry, tobacco, alcohol, and gambling are key ones where they have actually put some restrictions on them. Also, marketing to children. So they've put quite a few restrictions there. So where they see the opportunity to really manipulate people who don't necessarily have, who are, either have an addiction or who are children who don't really have their so much of their own voice, that's where they have put some restrictions on. Um, they do we do have like water consumption and stuff. So the government does intervene when it comes to things like that, when it does
Mm.
sort of environmental things. But certainly where we haven't seen it is in general consumer goods. So you just sort of you can the more you advertise, the more you grow, essentially. So and that's a pretty strong formula. And yeah, governments could come in on some of those, but I'm not sure how or what they would do.
Yeah.
It's a really interesting proposition.
Can I just, yeah, sorry, I just want to say to everyone, yeah, we've had a lot of people come in late, and Michelle said in the chat that they thought the session started at 1 p.m. I'm very sorry, I'm not sure where the mistake was made in terms of if one was made. There were a lot of you, so I assume something was written incorrectly somewhere. But no, the session started at 12 p.m., so I'm so sorry if you've joined late. The session has been fully recorded, so you will be able to catch up on what you missed later on. So my apologies for that. Sorry guys. Yeah. I assure you it wasn't me who made that mistake, but there was a mistake somewhere, I'm sure. So I'm very sorry for that. Um, but yes, rest assured it's all been recorded, so will be able to access it later. Anyway, we have another question in the chat, which is Rachel. The general belief is that the current economic system is broken, hence the need to change and transition to something better. But the pessimist view is that the current system is designed this way to oppress the oppressed and that the inequality is deliberate to control and allow the rich to make even more riches. What's your perspective on that?
Or
Big question.
where do I start with that question, Ilario? Okay. So the general belief is that the current economic system is broken, um, hence the need to change and transition to something better. The pessimist view is that the current system is designed that way, um, to take control and allow the rich to make even more rich, is what's my view. Oh, um, I agree. I think it is. I mean, I do think it's broken. Um, and I think there's a load of new work in the new economies that is looking at whether it is the well-being economy or whether it is, donut economics or regenerative economics that gives us a lot of opportunity to benefit people, the planet, and people's prosperity as well. So I think there's a big fear that people will be worse off in a new economy. So, but I think you're absolutely right. And at the moment, it is the way that it is structured to so that people who are investing money, who are the investors, are the ones who are continually making more money. And the more that we borrow, even as whether it's governments or whether it's individuals, to live, the more that they make, and the more that the more that you have, the more that you make, and that is the way that we're just, it's the way that it's all geared. I think that is my view, and I just don't see why we can't have a better balanced view of that. And that's, I mean, that's my absolute belief, is that it should be more balanced, and we shouldn't have such great inequality. And even at the moment, there's a lot of, the lower to middle class who are struggling at the moment as well. So but there's a lot of people who are not earning loads of money, and they're lots of homeless, and we've got a lot of inequality, and the rich are getting richer and the poor are getting poorer, but the gap is getting and the numbers of people in those buckets, or certainly in the lower buckets, is increasing, and there's fewer and fewer in that rich, or actually there's now quite a few in the rich, isn't there? But the distance is actually, there's a big distance, and there's a lot more people coming in who are starting to struggle. So yes, my absolute view is that we need to do something about it, and it needs to be more balanced, and we need to look after the people who are struggling. We need to look after just everyday people as well, and make sure that if we've got people doing. I mean, if I talk to a lot of small businesses in my work as well. So whilst I do medium to large businesses on this path, Peter business, it's because that's where I think the opportunity is for this. I talk to a lot of small business owners, and small business owners that, like, there's 2 million of us around Australia, and we're really, generally, small businesses are really struggling at the moment, and there's a lot of issues there too. So the economy, it is broken. It needs to be more fairly distributed, and making sure that we're not taking everything out of the planet.
Cheers, Ilario. That was a great question. We have a very philosophical line of inquiry from Rick Walters in the chat, which is how much inequality is appropriate?
How much inequality is appropriate?
If you believe inequality is appropriate, and we could qualify that by also asking what kinds of inequalities are
Yeah.
appropriate. But, I don't want to muddy the waters too much. Just, yeah, your thoughts on that. And I just want to say there's somebody joined and somebody else is currently joining. I just wanted to reiterate that, yes, there seems to have been a mistake somewhere with this session around timing. So it began at 12 p.m. So if you've missed it, I'm very sorry. It has been recorded, so you will be able to catch up on it. Anyway, yes,
Inequality.
inequality. Knock yourself out.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think we need to be much more on an equal, equality is ideal. But there's always going to be people that want to do more and work more and all of that sort of stuff, and maybe they should be given an opportunity to do that. And then some of the rest of us who don't want to, and I'll use the working day week. Some of us don't want to work 5 days a week. We want to be working 3 days a week and in our garden or looking after our kids or whatever it is. But there's and some people want to be working that 5 days a week, 6 days a week, and that's what gets them. So it's a bit like, what is your love language in a way? It's like, do you prefer flowers, or do you prefer
Yeah.
someone recognizing you? So there is a question to me around, what is equality as well, and that again, if you've got a mum who's not working and looking after her kids, there is absolutely no reason why she shouldn't be paid as much as that, the dad. Sorry, this is really traditional, but the dad is out there working 5 days a week, and the mum's not actually getting any money at all. So there's absolutely no reason why that should be happening. So I think there's there's got to be some sort of an equalizing that's happening, but maybe some people. It's such a tough question because then you end up back in 1984, don't you? So some people are, so we don't want to be there. We need a lot more equality, racial equality, sexual equality, all of the, just monetary equality, wealth
Mm.
equality, etc. It needs to be a lot more
Yeah.
equal, and really much more valuing diversity and inclusion and so forth as well.
Yeah, I'm a big fan of, for monetary equality, the idea of a UBI. There are some quite good
Yeah,
papers written on the prospects for UBI in the Australian context, if anybody's interested in that. But
yeah,
my big interest is in, I can't remember who it was by. I think there was some group, UBI Australia or something like that. They had a really good comprehensive policy proposal that was informed by modern monetary theory as well. So it was not costed in a traditional in a traditional way. It was actually leveraging this idea of using the Reserve Bank of Australia and stuff like that to actually do like credit issuance and stuff. It was very, very innovative. So I think some kind of UBI would do
yeah,
wonders for ex addressing exactly what you were just discussing. So,
yep.
yeah, I'm wondering if you would like to. We have two things here. We can address Natasha's comment, and Robin has also asked if we would like to discuss the role of cooperatives. So, um, which would you prefer?
Um,
But we should have time for both
yeah,
if there are no further questions.
Robin, we only discussed it briefly about the role of that cooperatives could play, and so we haven't really. I think Carla, that was a question that you actually asked previously, and it's the same response is that our belief, we sort of believe that there's probably quite a lot of opportunity in that medium business area for cooperatives. If it was sort of about shifting a business model to more cooperative, that it's probably sitting in that medium business area, or the small businesses who are just starting to move into the medium-sized business. We didn't really discuss anything more than that. And I think there is definitely a growing. I mean, the numbers show. If you there is a report out there on cooperatives, and the numbers show that there are more, and there's a lot more volume going through, a lot more value going through those businesses as well, and they're growing year on year. So certainly at a local community level, and a lot of the commodities. So, fruit and milk and all of those sorts of things. There's quite a lot that are happening at that level, helping to give them a little bit more power at a local community level,
Mm.
bargaining power, not power, but bargaining power at a localized level, and at a um, at a commodity level. So where you tend to have less bargaining power with some of the big guys, with the Coles and the Woolies and so forth, that being a cooperative then gives you more bargaining power to be able to get a better price and get better conditions and all those sorts of things, and invest more back into the farms, etc. So I think there's quite a lot of opportunities for cooperatives there. But that's really as far as I've looked into it. I don't know if you wanted to open that discussion up further, Tarek or Robin and Carla.
Well, I mean, we're nearly out of time, but I will just say that NENA is technically a cooperative. So,
Yeah.
I like to think that we play a bit of a role in our own way. Um, I will just quickly, we might have time to also look at Ilario and Natasha's second contributions. So Natasha has said, also very worried that it's mostly women, uh, BIPOC, older, disabled folks working superhumanly hard to try and fix a broken system where billionaires and trillionaires and their policies, whether having AI data centers in our countries or hugely extractive supply chains involving slavery, trafficking, and environmental degradation continue. So the question is, are we just tinkering around the edges too much? Which, yeah, is important to consider.
Yeah, and I guess I agree with you. It's quite interesting because when you get on these calls and you can see people's faces, you do sort of go, there is a lot of women and older people who are working and so forth who are working in this area, and it's not you're the same people that are working in the big corporates. Um, so that is, it does see, that is very obvious. And you can also see it in any of those, anything volunteering and those sorts of things, you can see the difference. So I agree with you there wholeheartedly. Are we tinkering around the edges too much? Look, I think there's a lot of, I I think the only like I think there's lots of work that can be done with small businesses in governments and all of those sorts of things. Where we've seen the biggest opportunity is because of the size. Natasha, I'm not sure if you saw the size thing, but it was 40% of people work for big, medium to big businesses, and about 54% of the value of products and services go through those businesses. If we can get businesses to start, if we start seeding the thoughts in with them, we've got to, we do have there is a big opportunity for making some serious moves there. But it is, it is a bit like, again, go back to Catherine Trebek's purpose video again. It is a bit like, governments are a great place to start, but how many times has poor Catherine gone in and then the governments have been with her and then somebody's changed staff and then it's like, and then that government isn't on board, So it's like that. And I think the best we can do is it's the more people who can sort of approach these, and the wellbeing economy and NENA and others like that are targeting governments, for government advocacy. There's some great independents in the Australian government that are there, that are sort of starting to be a lot more vocal, like David Pocock and so forth. We've got, so it really is chipping away. And if we keep chipping away at all of the different sizes and sides, and everybody starts chipping away at different pieces, that we've got to get somewhere. It's got to get to a tipping point where, you sort of like, where everybody realizes, yes, it's going to happen. And I do think there is a groundswell. And so I think, Sarah Wilson's book, and that's what a lot of us say. And, I've had that conversation as well. Are you just tinkering with businesses, trying to get them to do one workshop with, one product or something? And it's like, yes. But if I get that, if we do that one thing, that's one less thing we've got to worry about. So let's move on to the next one. And the more you do the edges, and the thing is, we can't tinker around the edges without measurement. So we've got to be providing the evidence as well. So whatever we're setting up as examples, we've got to have the evidence sitting behind it. So it's all too easy for the Unilever one is a great example, because all of a sudden, they've said that there was never any evidence that purpose-driven brands actually worked, and that, that their brands did have more environmental and social positive backgrounds. But they were able to pull out a figure of, they grow those brands in their portfolio grew 69%. So they were actually able to tie it back to evidence. And that's what a lot of people don't do, is go and put it back to that numerical evidence that people need to be able to see, because we're financially driven, we're a growth driven world. We're kind of financials make the world go around, because otherwise, if we don't have money, we don't have a roof over our head or food on the table. So we've got to just pull everything back to evidence. And I think that is the trick, is yes, you can have these smaller case studies and everyone tinkering away, and then you've just got to be proving that those things are working.
Yeah. I think, I would agree with a lot of that personally. I think that it's something where we benefit as a movement from having a very pluralistic and multifaceted approach to systems change and social transformation. People working in businesses, to get businesses to consider these things is great, absolutely needs to be done. And so do the other things, like Natasha's just outlined in the chat, and critical work around decoloniality and all of these things, activism and yeah, getting arrested, civil disobedience, all of these things should come together to form a sort of holistic movement that can really potently work towards transformative change in the country and the world, hopefully. So, yeah, I think that's just about all that we have time for. I would just like to, yeah, once again, absolutely thank all of you so much for joining us today. And a special thank you again to Rachel for sharing your insights and experiences with all of us. So, um, as I,
Thank you.
yeah, it was great. Yeah, wonderful. And great questions from everyone at the end too. Wonderful little conversation to round things off. So yeah, as I said, there'll be a recording of the session today available on our YouTube channel, NENA's YouTube channel, that is, in the coming days. So if you'd like to revisit it, or as we had happen with many folk, miss the start, feel free to, yeah, jump on there or share it with others, whatever you'd like. If you're interested in continuing conversations about regenerative business, sufficiency, stakeholder well-being, and redefining values beyond growth, we'd love to welcome you into NENA's Regenerative Business Hub and as a part of the NENA sphere. Yeah. So again, yeah, current members should have received an invitation to join the NENA sphere last week, and new members or those renewing their membership can join for $30 a year or $20 concession or unwaged. I'm really interested to see how your collective goes, Rachel, and what comes out of this work. And yeah, I really hope that this conversation we've had today has just been the beginning. So again, thank you all so much. It's been great.
I hope so too.
Yeah. Yeah. Wonderful.
Thank you.
Hope you all have a great
Thanks.
day and yeah, catch some of you in the session tomorrow, I hope.
Thanks for facilitating, Tarek. That was fabulous. And thank you,
You're
everyone, for
welcome.
your wonderful questions and for listening and so forth. Being
Wonderful.
involved, it's all wonderful. Thank you.
Thanks so much, everybody. All right. Well, have a great day. Go outside, get some fun. Let's get some sun. Get some sun. Do something
Have some
fun.
fun.
All right. Bye-bye,
All
everybody.
right. Bye all.